Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk One-on-One with the Bible. My name is Andrew Omer, and my guest today is Kris Emerson. Kris, it is great to have you with me. How are you?
I'm awesome. It's really good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're going to be talking about the specific topic that we worked on for this particular discussion, and I know that this is something that a lot of people need to hear and they have lots of questions about. And um, there was and I'll bring this up in just a moment when we really start to break down what we're going to be talking about. There was something that before we started the program that you mentioned that I think is very important to articulate to people in the church. And so hopefully what we're going to be talking about is going to be encouraging to anyone that watches. But before we dive into what we're going to be talking about, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, thanks. My name's Kris, and I am a Texan pretty much my whole life. I live east of Dallas in Lindale, Texas, which is near Tyler, Longview area, and I've been working here with the church for almost 8 years. I'm 44, and I've been preaching about half my life down in the Houston area, but about 8 years ago, we moved up here to Lindale and been working with the church here. And I'm married 25 plus years, 4 kids, two older ones that are 21 and 19, and two little ones that are somewhere in that 10 and 11 range right now. I think they've all got birthdays and it shakes everything up. But we're just having a great time here and trying to cultivate this culture of evangelism. I was talking to Andrew about it, and I hope we get to explore it. New converts have such a fire for sharing the truth. We want to stoke that, but we also want it to spread into our group of believers. You know, sometimes like if someone's been a Christian this long, they invite this many people to church. And when someone's been a Christian this long, they invite this many people to church. And we need to explore what's going on there. And we've been working on that here and trying to spread, as I was mentioning earlier, like I want to be a cheerleader to help Christians spread the gospel, not a quarterback who always has to have the ball. And that's something that we've been really passionate about. I think there's fruit that's come from that, and I'm just looking forward to sharing some of it today. So thankful to be here.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to reference, and I appreciate you bringing that up. As far as being a cheerleader, we use this word edification or encouraging the brethren that are in the church to be a part, to equip them in order to go out and tell others about who Jesus is, how to have a relationship with God. And so what we're really going to be focusing in on is teaching people to teach. And that is what I see, and probably you've experienced over and over. There's these obstacles that people have, whether it be something that they've created within themselves and have made their own barriers, thinking that, well, and this is something that the devil can use that is in his arsenal, get us to think that, well, you don't have enough information, you don't have enough knowledge or authority in the scriptures, that you couldn't possibly sit down with somebody and have a conversation, that you don't have every scripture, every word memorized, you're not able to answer every single question. Well, to break it down simply is, and it's echoed numerous times in scripture, we're not going to know everything. I mean, Moses wrote it in Deuteronomy towards the end of his life to remind those individuals that you're not going to know everything that God knows. Solomon wrote it multiple times in Ecclesiastes that you're just not going to know everything that God has done, no matter how hard you try. I'm, of course, paraphrasing. But of course, we're supposed to seek and know the will of God, as Paul wrote in Ephesians. And we can know what the will of God is in that same letter he states. And so, yeah, why don't you just really break down as far as what we're trying to get at and what we're hopefully trying to encourage people that we're trying to equip, as the Apostle Paul states in, again, referencing the Ephesian letter.
Sure. I like that you reference knowledge, because it's such an interesting thing. There are new Christians, people who learn about freedom in Jesus, and it settles into their heart, and they become very encouraged, and the burden is lifted. Their knowledge by all metrics in the church is very limited. They may still think Galatians is like a solar system in Star Trek or something, but they know Jesus, they know the gospel. And so their knowledge level is usually low, but their heart is very pliable and excited, and they tend to be more evangelistic. It's a bit of an overstatement, but in rule, there tends to be this idea. There's this young lady here who was baptized 1 year ago yesterday, came up on my feed. And she came to me a few months ago, and we have a Bible study booklet we use here, which I'll be talking to you about today. And people say, hey, I need 1 or 2 to hand to a friend. She said, I need 20 of them. I'm headed to a family reunion. Like, she wants to share the gospel because it's burning in our heart. Sometimes when we've been a Christian a long time, our knowledge keeps growing. There's no doubt about it. Worship, Bible classes. But sometimes knowledge puffs us up a little bit. And sometimes the more we know, we ought to be better equipped. But something happens and the heart hardens, maybe because of failed attempts. The heart hardens for whatever reason. And so we have all this knowledge, and sometimes we become less evangelistic. So knowledge is a useful tool, but I'm not sure we've used it really, really well. And so what we have to do is knowledge is vital, but extra knowledge beyond how to be saved, we're going to put over in the corner a little bit today, because I don't think like you're saying, you don't need extra knowledge beyond how to be saved in order to be a great evangelist. And sometimes it turns into interesting facets, like we believe that the objective is for me to be saved. And now that I'm in the church, that's all I'm here to do is get in the church. Well, if God's objective is just to save you, Andrew, he should have already taken you home. Why are you still here? Well, it turns out the objective is to share the gospel, not just to be saved, but Ephesians 2, 8, 9, and 10, by grace he saved you, not as a result of works, so that you would now go be his workmanship. And so I think part of it is getting Christians who've been in for a longer time to look at those new Christians and go, man, they're excited to be saved, and all they want to do is share it. I've been saved a long time, and somehow I've settled into this idea that was the end game for me to be saved. If that's the end game, then you need to go on. God has kept you here for teaching. And some of this for me is about preachers. I'm not a tattoo guy. I don't have any tattoos. But if preachers are going to get tattoos, they may ought to get 2 Timothy 2:2 tattooed on their forehead in reverse. So every day when you're brushing your teeth, you go, okay, my job is to teach people to teach people. My job is to equip Christians to go out and share the gospel with the world. I think we've gotten on defense. Like, our job is just to keep people from falling away and keep everything held together. Look, trust God more. Okay. God's at work, but we are instruments for that. So I wish more preachers understood that you're here to, like I said, cheerlead and equip people to go share, and to understand the vitality of sharing, not to be the quarterback that is the only person who's evangelistic. Because from a preacher perspective, Andrew, the bus principle is always in play. You may choose to get on a bus and leave Louisville. The elders there may put you on a bus and say, get out of Louisville. Or you may get hit by a bus on your way to Starbucks. Preachers are not always going to be at those churches to do the work. So while we're here, and this is what I love about your program, and I love about being a part of it today, is we've got to get more elders and preachers and church leaders to use that knowledge to try to not only share the gospel themselves, but like, if I'm not here tomorrow and this church has to go 2 years without an evangelist, let's say that because there's not too many of them out there, can't get an evangelist. Will it still be an evangelistic church? Will it still be following up on leads? Will they still be inviting people? Who's going to baptize everybody? Look, we've had about 30 baptisms in the last 12 months here. I baptized about 5 of those people. That's the thing I'm most proud of, is that when I'm not here, the gospel is being spread. And that's what I mean by a culture of evangelism. You don't need a great evangelist. You need a grassroots. And to me, and I know your program is largely for new converts, I'm just excited about new converts and how they really want to do this. I'll tell you one more thing, then I'll pause. I worked with a church in Beaumont a few years ago before I moved here, Dowling Road. And one of the main reasons I joined there is there's a fella there who helps to baptize about 20 people a year. And I wanted to know how Wesley Pollard was doing that. And he said, Kris, I'll tell you how. I have a Bible study at my house every Thursday night at 7. Give me one new convert. That's all I need. One. And then I'll tell that new convert to go invite people they think need the message. Now, you can tell members who've been here 20 years, we're going to have a study on Thursday, invite people who need the message. They may not invite anybody. Hopefully they will. These new converts were inviting everybody. And he was cultivating the energy of new converts into, I would say, hundreds of baptisms in his life. So I'm excited about the prospect, but we got to get our heads in the right place, that we're still here. I'm a big Astros fan. I'd love to see the Astros win the World Series 5 more times, but that's not why I'm here. I want to go to heaven. That's not why I'm here. I'm already saved. I am here because there are unsaved people God is putting in my life. And as a preacher, in the lives of the membership here, we have got to reach those people. So part of it is mission orientation. That's the mission. And I'm, hopeful to talk about that with you today.
Yeah, just this whole idea of passing along. You mentioned 2 Timothy 2:2, which I'll just go ahead and read it. Paul writing to his true child in the faith, the things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, and trust these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. I believe that you were also on another program that I had the privilege of doing with Brother Dan Barker, and that's one of his passages that he reads, and of course it says men there, and that letter is mainly to encourage the young evangelist and other young evangelists, but it is so appropriate too for those that are what are perceived as overlooked, and that is, okay, what can a young woman do, or even a older a woman do for the women that they encounter, if they are able to have personal interactions and studies themselves. But this whole idea of passing it along and encouraging, being that cheerleader, as what you had talked about, instead of the necessity as either we're viewed or our initial reaction is to want to go and grab the ball, so to speak, because we feel like, well, it's either our duty, which of course it is our duty to present the gospel, but it's not as if we're supposed to be the only one that holds the ball. And that is to hand it off and say, hey, you run with it, because you too, and I always like to remind multiple times, quite often in messages to the brethren, as far as what the apostle Peter wrote in 1 Peter 2:9, because this is just a message that is for everyone, and it is what he also was. This was a passage that he had quoted from the Old Testament. And it says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession. And here's the key part: so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So just going back to what you're saying, I mean, we're wanting to encourage everyone among us to ultimately to be able to go out and be able to have those conversations. And I like the idea, and hopefully you'll explore it, I'm sure you will, of this whole idea of being able to give some resources or some tools. Our ultimate tool is God's word,
Sure.
and that's what we must have with us at all times. But some other things that are helpful. I mean, we've got tracks or other corresponding courses to give to people, but like, what are some of the things? And I don't want to necessarily divert from what you had in mind of what you're going to share, but as you were mentioning that this individual who was going to be going to a reunion, that want to be equipped and prepared to say, like, here, why don't you check this out, and this might be some beneficial information for you. But go ahead and share more on what you wanted to share.
Yeah. We're going to get into that. We're leading into it. What we're trying to do is bait everybody to get on board with us. You mentioned young ladies a few minutes ago, and you think, well, are we talking about everybody, men and women, younger and older? Yes, that's the point. I remember listening to some teaching when I was growing up on the Great Commission, which is Matthew 28. And I'll read it for the audience. Matthew 28, where Jesus said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them. So we're making disciples. We're teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. And lo, I'm with you even to the ends of the age. I remember teaching in my youth that said this was just the apostles, and it was just for the apostles. And it was like, be evangelistic if you can, use your example, but like mission orientation was just for the 12. I do not agree with that. And I don't think the book of Acts agrees with that. In Acts 8, it says they went about preaching everywhere. That had nothing to do with pulpits and Sundays. That was men and women, young and old, just sharing the gospel of Jesus. Now, we're going to get into some practicality of how we've tried to create that culture here. But when you mention young women, it reminded me of a couple of stories. I was preaching in Mauriceville, Texas for a few years, which is way down southeast, almost in Louisiana. And there were two whole rows of Christians who belonged to one family, two whole rows, aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, siblings. And there was one girl there who was responsible for all of it, a high school girl who talked to her friend at school about Jesus just a little bit and invited her to come to church. And she did. She came to church. And they started studying the scripture together. And that girl converted her friend. And those two rows of people all are the family of her friend. Because she talked to Jesus with one high school girl and she came, an entire family's life forever got changed. Like, that's the apple in a seed idea. Who can count the number of apples in one planted seed? It just keeps cultivating. Here, I'll bring Taylor Reyes back in. I love her. She's just a good example, but she was working at Dairy Queen, going through a tough time in her life. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, I think, today too, about who you need to be searching for. I mean, we spread the seed everywhere, but there are people who clearly are hurting. And I think I'd gone to Dairy Queen one time and handed her a card a year or two ago, but a lady from our church, just a sweet, sweet lady, was at Dairy Queen, met her while ordering, invited her to church. And Taylor said, hey, I think I've been invited to that church before. So she came, and that lady studied with her. And as a result of that, Taylor was baptized. And then she invited her husband's boss, and he and his wife were recently baptized. Like, there's no limit to what can happen if we're searching. But first, we have to have all hands on deck. This idea that local preachers are your chief evangelists and that everything funnels through them is just biblically incorrect. I'm at Lindale to equip these saints to do the work. I'm not here to do the work for them. What do we want to do? Hire 2 or 3 more guys to go do the work for them? We're here to equip them to do the work. So part of what we're doing early in this episode is everybody is in and we're all on board, and we answer the call, because we really want to create a church like the Thessalonica church, Thessalonian church. Remember 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verses 8, 9, and 10? Paul says, I keep traveling around going, hey, let me tell you about the Thessalonian church. And they're like, you don't need to tell us about the Thessalonian church. We just had a Thessalonian Christian in here last week, and he won't shut up about it. He keeps talking about how they gave up idols and they turned to the living God, and then we need to do it too. Paul didn't have to go around lighting fires. He lit a fire in that church, and that church started to burn. And that's what we want to build. And I know that's exciting. If you're a preacher listening, you're going, that is so exciting, because it is exciting. And we have an elder here, great man, elder, who's just always been a good elder, but he never studied with anyone or converted them. Well, he's the one who baptized Taylor's husband's boss and his wife. And like now he's on fire for baptizing people. Like that guy's been a Christian his whole life, starting that fire. So we're really interested in how to do that. Now, one more thing I want to share before we get into how. I've preached 2 sermons on evangelism every year, just like everybody has. And I grew up hearing 2 sermons a year on evangelism. But for the most part, it was just go do it as we stand and sing. And it just made me feel terrible about myself. Here I am reading all these passages. How many Bible passages tell us to be evangelistic? A bunch do. But we leave going, I'm just not. And so sometimes we think we can like out church our weaknesses. I'll just keep going to church all the time, and that'll make up for the fact that I don't spread the gospel. If you get nothing out of this hour, get that out. No amount of going to church can replace the heart of Christ for sharing the gospel. We cannot go, well, I'm not like a disciple of Jesus in the traditional sense where I go around telling people about Jesus, but I go to the right church and I never miss. Not a substitute. That's where we get into the country club over hospital mentality. I am a part of the right country club. I know I'm not like a doctor, hospital nurse, but the country club mentality, Andrew, for local churches is turning into what country clubs turn into. You ever been to a country club lately, Andrew? It's old paneled walls, dirty old chairs, and 5 guys in their 80s playing poker. Like it's not vibrant anymore. It lost its vibrance. It lost its youth. And that's what churches are experiencing. So we've got to get back to seeding the gospel as a habit, as natural. Let me tell you a quick story, and then I'll turn it back to you, and then we'll get into the specifics after this. About 6 years ago, I was invited to go do an evangelism seminar with a group of guys through a Saturday. And there were about 50 guys there, most of which were preachers like you, or shepherds, deacons, church leaders. And I opened with a question. I said, guys, I got 2 questions for you. The second one is the most important one, but I want to open with this. If a Bible study fell in your lap today, you're at Taco Bell and somebody's like, hey, would you study the Bible with me? What have you kind of pre-prepared? It's all going to be scripture, but what have you kind of pre-organized so that you could get into that efficiently? And it was early, Andrew, so and nobody had their coffee yet. So the fact that it was silence for 10 seconds, I let that go. But over the next minute or two, there was a lot of silence. And I was like, come on, guys, you guys are elders, preachers. Tell me what you're ready to give them, do with them. Where would you start? And one guy was like, I would start in Luke. And I said, cool, it's 80 verses. It's a big start. But okay, one guy was like, I'd meet them where they are. And I thought, okay, he's probably talented enough to do that. But what I found was most of the men had not become acclimated with a standard approach. They were going to wing it. And I said, guys, I haven't even asked you my main question yet. Here's the main question. Elders, preachers, if a member of the church where you shepherd, just a regular old member, if they had a Bible study fall into their lap today, which you've been telling them twice a year, they got to do something with, what have you equipped them to do? Have you standardized an approach? Have you taught them how to be comfortable with an approach? What material have you acclimated them to so they at least give somebody some material? Andrew, man, nobody said anything. It started to trickle out. There were some things, but it was kind of some reachbacks, like film strips and this and that. What I've found was, and I'm guilty too, I was standing there with them. And I just recently begun to change because I'd spent some time at the Dallin Road Church. So it's not a me versus them. We had not done a good job of teaching our members how to teach. We simply tell them to teach. It won't work. Telling them to teach, show them how to teach. So I'm going to get into some of the approach on that. I'm going to turn it back to you in case you have any follow-up comments or questions. But what I'm trying to get people to do early here is buy into this idea that each person needs to do it. We can do it. We need to be trained to do it. We want to train the whole church equally to do it. Some will have more skills than others, that's for sure. But I found that there's more heart than skill in evangelism. And really, there's more heart than knowledge. And you know what I mean by that? I don't mean like teaching things that aren't true, but I mean like the core knowledge is is all you really need to bring someone to Christ. And then we try to grow it over time. So we'll get into a couple specifics, but I hope that we're really pitching this idea of communal cultural evangelism.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the things. There's a lot out there. There's lots of potential methods, and people can get bogged down, myself included. Okay, what is necessarily the best way to approach an individual or a given situation? If, for instance, your example, if someone came and I needed to be prepared in a moment's notice to facilitate a Bible class or a Bible study, I should say. I mean, like, what am I going to do? It's nothing planned. It's just in the moment. I mean, going and thinking about 1 Peter 3:15. That's a very common passage that we as preachers and Christians know. I need to be prepared at all times to be able to tell somebody why I have the hope that I have. And it just made me think, while you were talking about, one of the areas that I know that I can relate to, and that's with anyone and everyone everywhere that's ever lived. And I've been having the opportunity to engage with somebody, not for the gospel's sake, hopefully, maybe Lord willing, but one of their big things that they talk about is lead with your weakness. Just makes me just correlate that or correspond with, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. And so I'm still growing. I'm still needing to mature. And so it's that humility thing. I'm not thinking too less of myself. I'm not thinking too high of myself. It goes back to that thing that C.S. Lewis is well known for, about what humility really looks like. It's not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. And I like what you're getting at. And I really do think that that's a lot of people's issues, is trying to find out, okay, what is something I can rely on, as far as this is how I can start with somebody, no matter where they're at, where they are, somebody that knows nothing about Scripture, never known or had any experience with having a relationship with God. Maybe it's somebody that is part of a different belief system, different faith, or an agnostic, atheist, whatever. And so just having that willingness and being open to the fact of, you know what, and I've tried to stress this, and I know I need to continue to stress that I like what you've said. We need everybody. It's always should have been, as it's presented at the very beginning of the book of Acts. It was an all hands on deck mentality, and that's what the church is supposed to be. And so this idea of having a cultural, even evangelistic mindset is what is needed. And so go ahead.
I love it. Would sidetrack me to talk about it too much, but I love that I wrote it down, lead with weakness. That's really cool. I host a podcast, the Excel Still More podcast, and I always have 3-word titles that I've tried to stick with for about 5 years. And I wrote down lead with weakness. And then of course, 1 Timothy chapter 1, where Paul led with that. And humility is really, really important. I think that no matter how long you've been a Christian, your need for the grace of the Lord only grows, because you know more. You know, you would think the longer you're a Christian, the less you need grace. But actually, the longer you're a Christian, the more you see what the standard is, the more you recognize how, despite your best efforts, you are far below it. And your yearning for God's grace ought to increase over time. And if your yearning for God's grace increases over time, you'll stay humble and thankful, and you'll share the gospel out of gratitude. if we happen to take this really, I don't know what word to use, dumb road. I use dumb because we think we're smart, but we're not. Where we're Christians, and all of a sudden I know more, I'm better, I'm stronger, I dress up every Sunday, I'm there all the time, and so I kind of like need God's grace less. You will not extend it to others any more than you feel like you need it. I think that's part of this whole, I've been a Christian this long, I share the gospel this much. There's something weird about when you don't feel every day that you need God's mercy, you don't feel that, you're probably not going to share that with others, but that feeling ought to deepen. So I love that you brought that up, because there's, we can talk tactics. I'm going to go grab something here in just a second to show you, but we can talk tactics all we want, but this heart of humility and gratitude must permeate through our being. And that's where it comes from, looking for hurting people. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk out that door because I just thought that I needed these, but also I think it illustrates the point well. Outside of that door is our foyer, our main area where everybody comes. I'm going to go grab 2 items that are out there, and I want you to be thinking about the fact that that's where they are. And then I'm going to talk to you about them, some things that I learned from the Dallin Road Church and some things we've worked on. So I'll be right back. Okay, so let's talk about how we try to affect the culture of evangelism. I get a chance to preach around the country somewhat regularly, and I find that this is a constant need. Preachers talking about how to do that. Well, I was at the Dallin Road Church of Christ in Beaumont, Texas for a few years. And one of the things I noticed when I first got there is they had a business card. Doesn't matter what it looks like. This has just got Lindale on it and some stuff on the back and a blank line. That's all that matters for you, and this little rubber band. And so what we found was they were stacked everywhere. Everywhere I go, there were stacks of these, and there were 5 in each stack. And the principle was very simple to the membership. Let's start with something I know we all can do. To begin every month, grab a stack. On the back, write your name and phone number. That's it. Grab a stack of 5. It's March the 1st, April the 1st. Write your name on it. Put it in your purse, put it in your wallet, put it in your car. By the end of the month, have invited 5 people to church. That's it. Just go, hey, I go to the Lindale Church. Would love for you to come and visit. And every month, just hand out 5 of these. Now, what was really cool about the Dallin Road Church that always struck with me is they had about 10 elders at the time. And those elders would meet once a month, like elders often do. And they had a sheet called a KPI sheet, Kingdom Performance Indicator. And they held each other accountable every month for doing their Bible read every day, for 3 interactions with weak sheep. It's a longer discussion, but part of it was, did you hand out 5 invitations for people to come and visit our church? And if an elder, and this is where it has to start, right? If an elder goes, I only handed out 3, he would get directly addressed in that meeting for why he could not find 5 souls that needed to come and experience the fellowship of our church family. It was, I sobbed a little. I'm a little bit of a crier, but I couldn't believe I was watching elders. How can you expect a membership to pick up 5 cards if the shepherds aren't doing 5 cards? And of course they did. And when I got to Lindale, we made these, and I started stacking them. And every Wednesday night I give a 2-minute speech on, this is what we're about. This is who we are. We're people who love what we do. We love being together. We love the truth. We're going to hand out 5. And I would count them every week. How many got picked up? And I'd say, well, last month, we had about 25 packets picked up. That's good, but let's do a little bit better. And, one of my best friends here is an elder, Ben Shipley. He said, your team is always best at what you coach the most. And so I coached it and coached it and coached it. And we ended up really making this a part of what we do. Like, it's a part of the church here. If you become a new member here, somebody's probably going to hand you these and go, hey, here's what we do. We invite people to church. Now, all this does is gets fish jumping in the boat, like people coming to church on Sunday and Wednesday or checking us out online. But that's a start. Like, there's so many churches that are just starving for contacts. And you can convert someone with them not coming to your church. That's your story. You were converted from a meetup that didn't have to do with a local church. But for the most part, people want to come and find out what you're about. So this became really, really big. I remember a story, the Dallin Road Church, the deacons there had investigated renting a big billboard, inviting people to the Dallin Road Church, but it was pretty costly. And so they asked the elders, can we fund this billboard? And the elders were like, let's have a meeting and talk about it. And so I got up in that meeting, and my numbers aren't coming to me now, but I said, hey, if you paid X thousands of dollars, and at the end of the year, it meant you had 2,000 people who directly felt invited to church, would it be worth the money? And they were like, be worth the money. And then I pulled these out. I said, there's 30 guys in the room right now, just 30 of us, not counting our wives, not counting everybody else here. If we all left today and we grabbed these, and we just handed out 5 a month, by the end of the year, we would have 2,000 people personally invited to our church. just by the 30 guys in the room. You can do the math on me later, but it's somewhere in that range. And we would be doing what God does. Billboards are fine, not against a billboard, but the gospel was personally shared from Christian to non-Christian, and their idea was good, but this was better. So we have pushed this really, 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 really hard to create a culture of invitation. Now, what that's led to is fish in the boat, right? Sunday, there are visitors, people who got invited, people who viewed online for a couple of months. I'm a proponent for online live streaming because I don't think people will enter a building for the first time unless they've been in there before, which sounds impossible. But this is how they get in there. They view it. They go, okay, they don't sacrifice goats in there. Okay, that looks like a pretty safe place for me. And then they come and visit. So handing out cards says, here's my number. Call me if you have any questions. Call me. And they don't put Kris's number on here. No. They don't need to call Kris. That's me. They need to call the person who invited them. That's what we're doing. They can go to the website and they can check out the service. They got the address. They can come and visit. So this is really big. Secondly, though, it doesn't answer the bigger question, which is, what do you do if you get a Bible study? I remember a preacher friend of mine, he passed away a few years ago, Luther Bollenbacher. He said the 7 scariest words in Christian fellowship is, will you study the Bible with me? Because what if they say yes? What if you go, will you study the Bible with me? And they go, love to. Well, we're going, where's Kris's number? We got to get somebody who can do it. Bad strategy. They don't know me. They know you. You're the one at Dairy Queen that you bought the burger from. Like, getting that going. So, but the question remains, what are they going to do? Well, look, here's the thing, Andrew. I feel like a church, as long as it's the truth, can pick anything they want. If they want to go back to film strips, go back to film strips. If they want to do the big picture presentation, which I can send you a file of, that's also pretty good, they can do that. If they want to do Bibles where you already have like highlighted all the verses and the page numbers on a little standard where you go, let's just go through these 10, do that. But gentlemen, and I'm speaking to preachers and elders here, pick a thing or two and make it common. So we use this thing, it's called the gospel message. I've been working on it 15, 20 years. I found an old booklet somewhere one time. I've just been whittling on it. It's 4 lessons, not complicated by any degree. Notice it has, these are our old cards. We've updated our cards a little bit, but it has our cards on the front. So you do the same thing. You write your name and number, and you can hand this to someone. If you feel like you want to give them a little bit more substance, we want our members to keep these in their car, and you hand it. Outside there, they're on the wall. And if a visitor comes and says, hey, love your church, love to know more about the truth, we go grab one, you write your name and number on it, and you hand it to them, right? 4 lesson book. But here's the thing. And we could go through the details of this, but you would find it's very normal. I mean, it's just organized in a way I think is fruitful. Also, it's organized in a way that if I never saw them again, I might see them in heaven, because it's the passages of scripture organized in a way that's good to teach, but it's also user-friendly if there's not a teacher. Anyway, I'll send you a link to this. It's totally free, nothing to it. But here's what I did. Every 3 years, the Lindale Church, I teach this to our people. I don't mean on a Tuesday night at my house. I mean on a Sunday morning and a Wednesday night, we put a copy of this in every member's hand in the auditorium. We make it the only adult class. You write your name on it, and we go through it together. I don't just teach you what's in it. I kind of teach you, here's a way you might want to teach this, and here's a way you might want to address that, and here's a little imagery. We keep blank pages on this side so they can write down, like, try this little thing. I teach them how to teach it. We did it the first months I was here, 2015. We did it in 2018. We did it 2021. We're going to do it in 2000. We just keep doing it. And every time it gets our entire membership a little bit more comfortable that they can hand out something. And if they get the call, they know to tell them to be ready to do lesson 1. And what we found over time, the first years here, most of the baptisms were me doing the studies, which is fine. I'm still a Christian too, but I share the gospel with people because I'm a Christian, not because I'm a preacher. But over time, we found that more Christians were comfortable to hand out these and then hand out these and then do those studies. And they didn't have to be Christians long. This is basic. And so we get to this year and we have, I don't know how many baptisms this year, but let's say there's a dozen. Where our members exclusively, I've not gone through this many times in the last year, just basically my contacts, the ones that I make. Otherwise, the members do it. And it is so exciting to have that sense of teachers making teachers. Like you said in the intro, sometimes we feel 2 Timothy 2:2, like we have to know 100 things before we can start sharing. If you know Christ and him crucified, you know the gospel, you're ready to share. And so this is big for me. I get a lot of calls about it, about, well, where did you do it? Did you do it in a side class? What if people don't want to do it? What do you mean, what if people don't want to do it? Like, what, are you just going to go preach some stuff about how great the church is where they worship? There's no substitute for evangelism. We just do it. And so those are some things I'm really passionate about. It doesn't have to be this book. It really, really doesn't. But standardize something so that if a Bible study is presented to a member of the church where you preach or lead, they're ready to go. They're equipped. And I think that over time, I just think it's a good approach. And I think it's been working for us.
And so is that what ultimately, when you were with that group of 50, when you asked those two main questions, that was like the point you were really hitting home as far as, be prepared with, something. And you gave the example, your personal example of what your group does.
Yep.
And you showed handing out the cards and really making it a practice of knowing this particular material, this gospel message booklet. And that's what you were kind of given this group of men as an example.
100%. 100%. We spent the day doing the booklet. We spent the day every 3 years when I preach here, we'll go through what's called the big picture presentation, which is a slideshow. It's also very, very good. Anything based on the gospel is going to be good. And that was the whole point of that day, is here are some things we can do. Pick something and do it. So I would just tell our preachers, don't forget this question. If a Bible study fell in the lap of one of the members where you preach tomorrow, how have you equipped them to confidently engage in that study? How have you encouraged them to do that? Now, when somebody in the Lindale auditorium goes, hey, that person over there might be interested in the truth. Now I say, well, I'll go meet them. I want to go meet them. But I point to this rack and I go get it. Go get it. Write your name on it. Write your number on it. And they get it there. And I say, go give it to them, and like that's the cheerleading idea. Because like I say, that bus principle is always in play. I'm not always going to be right here in the middle of this. And I think more preachers need to get out of the middle of everything anyway. We're trying to support a system so that we can back away from that system, which is very much the New Testament model, wasn't it? Timothy would go for a few years and then go over here and live for a few years. Unfortunately, I think the single pastor system is settled in some historical circles where the pastor, the preacher, becomes the center of everything and it only works because of him. We need to lower ourselves down, lift up this group, particularly the eldership and the members behind them, and be able to sort of back away and watch it happen. And evangelistic teaching and infusing them with knowledge is a big part of that.
Yeah, I think that is, and I've been guilty of that too, of, okay, if I sort of try to encourage, or what may seem to be pawning off a Bible study, I should be encouraging that individual or equipping that individual, giving them suggestions on how they might be able to share with another individual. And that is so important, because we're not the main focus. First and foremost, it's Christ. I mean, like, and each individual who wears the name, who has agreed to wear the name of Christian, it is upon them as well to go and invite people to know who Jesus is. I know that there's this unfortunate mindset, and I have to lump myself into that group, where it's sort of, okay, I just got to get them in the building. I just got to get them on a Sunday and or a Wednesday so they can hear the person that is teaching the class or presenting the message. And that's an aspect of evangelism, because they're getting presented with the word. But when we're boiled down to it, we're talking about, and I like how you saying, it's got to be personal. I mean, you got to get with that individual, develop that rapport, and realize, hey, you know, I love you enough to tell you the truth. Someone, there's this video of I've used this in a lesson before because I thought it was just so powerful. This celebrity, who's an atheist, and in this video, he's made the bold statement of, I know for a fact that there is no God. And of course, there's no way that he could, there's no way he could prove that, as you and I would know. But the point of what he made was he, as an entertainer, performed a show of what he does. And then someone at the end who was at that show or whatever, gave him a Bible with like a little message in it. And this guy, this entertainer celebrity, looked at this guy, and he recognized that he had true care for this individual. And I mean, it didn't change his beliefs, but the action that the other person took really struck him, because he took upon, and he's well spoken, this atheist celebrity. I know I'm a little bit long with this, but hopefully you'll stick with me and get the point. He ultimately said, like, if you know for a fact that what you believe is true, that what you're saying about eternal salvation and knowing somebody that is definitely going to, die and spending eternal in eternal torment and suffering. I mean, how much do you have to, and this was like the home run or the main point of his argument, because he was saying, I respect people that share their faith and don't respect people that don't share their faith, because how much do you have to hate somebody not to share?
Yeah.
And he uses this illustration of, okay, somebody that is on a highway or on a road, and there's a truck that is barreling down and they are going to die. And he says, at some point, I am going to push you out of the way, because, I mean, unless I do something, you're going to die. And it goes back to how much do I have to hate you to know, or to allow that truck to come and kill you? No, at some point, I'm going to push you out of the way. And so that's just that illustration of, I mean, how much do we really love somebody?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And I know what you're talking about there, and I think that is a good illustration. And to me, it goes back to what you said earlier about leading with weakness and humility and gratitude. If Christians don't get out of bed every morning thankful for God's mercy and in full out gratitude for the way that he has patiently bore with us, you and me, Andrew, and everybody else, and just how good he is to us and how much we need him, if that grace isn't changing our hearts, then we will not be effective evangelists. I wish I could tell you that you just can skip that and go love your neighbor, but you have to love God before you love your neighbor. And when you love God and you're so thankful for God, and every day you're like, man, I just sinned again yesterday and God is with me, and I just love this freedom that I get to experience even though I don't deserve it, you're going to see that maybe that's a beautiful package you can share with someone else. But if we grow in knowledge over time, we kind of feel like we deserve to be here, and we've cleared some hurdles to get here, and others, it's a long road for others to clear as many hurdles as me, and you start thinking, it's not even worth it. And we would never say it's not even worth it, but we're behaving in a way that is not filled with gratitude. So I love your idea of humility. I think it's a wonderful place to start. And a couple of things you mentioned about worship is, inviting people is a good place to start, because you want them to come and experience the joy of worship where you are. There needs to be joy of worship where you are. But sometimes we call that fish jumping in the boat. But if you've ever been, I've got 2 daughters, and if I take my daughters fishing when they're 5 or 6 years old and a fish jumps in the boat, they start screaming and hoping that it will get back out of the boat. And I think probably the transition that we have to make is we have to be so excited about sharing this mercy that when a fish jumps in the boat, we get excited. Sometimes I wonder if a fish jumped in the boat and it was in my seat, if I wouldn't throw it out so that I could have my seat. We talk about our pews and somebody sitting in our pew. It's like, what are you doing here? Who are you and what are you doing here? That's kind of a funny example, but there's a lot of reality to it. When people come and visit our church, it's the Lord being one who's not yet into our lives because he wants to use us. We are his workmanship. Our purpose is not just to get to heaven. Let's go. Our purpose is to stay here and help people get to heaven. So we need that sense of inviting people like this is just getting people to jump into the boat, which is really, really great. But the whole purpose here is to save other people, to love your neighbor. So let's have a church attitude for that, a lot of humility and work, and get our visitors to come and look at that as an opportunity. I've kind of changed my view some on church buildings. I went through a little period a few years ago where I thought we should just sell all the church buildings, get some metal buildings, meet, and just they cost so much and all this. But I do think that if we do this right and we cultivate this culturally, that your church building actually becomes a great evangelism tool. It's not just a place for Christians to meet. We could do that under a tree, but it's a place where we actually start getting fish to come swim around and go, hey, what's going on here? And so it sort of changed my attitude a little bit about that. But I love your idea of humility and passion, because that's where this all going to start.
Just a quick moment. You cut out there for just a second. You were talking about, and it was only just for a moment, but I want to make sure I got that point because I think it was very important. You were talking about if someone is in their pew mentality, and just we do have that, unfortunately, where if you're sitting in that pew, like, who are you? And then you cut out there for a moment. You might have been saying, well, it's an opportunity maybe to engage. I just don't know what you were saying right there.
Well, we're back to that thinking about country club versus a hospital. You know, a country club, don't sit in my seat. Don't order in front of me. I've earned the right to be here. If you want to go through the steps and pay your dues, then maybe you can start to get some of the respect. Now, no Christian would say that out loud. Nobody would go, that's who I am. But, you know, our practice is where our message really is. And there's some people that aren't comfortable with visitors who maybe have tattoos or are in rehab programs, or, you know, is going to be messy. You know, it's going to be a lot of work. And it would be better if they just didn't come, wouldn't it? It'd be better if we just didn't have to deal with that. And part of it, and I'm being facetious, but part of it's that humility of understanding that I'm messier than they are if you really want to get under the cover of it all. And God is still with me, and I want you to come on that journey with me. So part of it is conditioning our churches for visitors, where we spend the 5 minutes before church greeting visitors. We spend 5 or 10 minutes afterwards greeting visitors, getting to know them. That's not preacher job. I can't reach everybody. We got a bunch of people at this church. I can't reach everybody. The church, it's giving up your seat. It's welcoming them to sit next to you. Like, what I'm saying is we preach on evangelism twice a year, but sometimes it's dead on arrival. As soon as the message hits the audience, it's already dead. Why is it already dead? Maybe because we've got a country club mentality that isn't going to save anybody anyway, instead of a hospital where we're both the patients and the nurses and doctors, which is very cool and interesting and messy and bloody and hard. It's DOA because we haven't conditioned ourselves. We haven't prepared our members to engage in those studies. And we need to do better work to get everybody to understand our true purpose. So I think there's a lot that goes into this. It's not you listen to this for an hour and a month from now your church is on fire, but you're going to start some little burning places. And I'm just telling you over time that consistency in this will pay off. I want to say a couple more things about the booklet. You can do anything you want, but I'll tell you why I like written booklets with questions. There's just Bible verses. You fill in verses, fill in words. You ask them simple yes and no questions. You know, if you hand them this book and you ask them to do lesson 1, I've had every possible outcome, Andrew. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I've had every possible outcome. I've had people who never showed up to the study. I've had people who showed up and didn't bring their books. I tell them, if you bring your book and it's filled in, it's a half an hour. If you don't, it's going to take an hour. That really helps. I've had people show up with lesson 1 done twice. I've had people show up to the study with all 12 pages filled in and their swimming trunks in a Walmart bag. They were ready to become a Christian. They've been searching for it their whole lives. They studied, and the book's nothing, but it takes you through the gospel. And they showed up ready. Like, this is why I like this over film strips and slideshows where they come in cold and you show them things and then you have to explain those things. It's valuable, but I want them to have a chance to do their own work, to get into the word. We also hand out Bibles. This is a New American Standard. We get them the Bible and the book. We go, this is yours now. So I was just going to get back to why I think paper products are good, because they invite the inquisitive one to start digging in, and it takes a little bit of the weight off of the Christian, because you show up, they've done their lesson, and it flows a little bit easier. So there's things we can do. What I'm saying is there's a lot of great things we can do to make this message of evangelism work, and I hope some of that's helpful to you.
Any final thoughts?
I'm just thankful to get to share, and I'm prayerful that the Lord is using us, and I'm thankful for what you're doing. You told me before that you're trying to really speak to new converts and people who are new in the faith. And to those who are listening, thank you for listening. And you've got a fire burning in you that is beautiful and powerful. And I want to be an encouragement to you. Anything we can do to help. One more thing that I had noted that I wanted to mention about leads, and new converts are really great at this because they know they were broken and now they've been healed by Christ, and they have a lot of broken people already in their lives. One of the kickbacks we get on handing out cards and booklets is, I tried that with my aunt and uncle. I tried that with my cousin. I tried that with my coworker, and they just didn't want to hear it. And of course, we got to sow the seed. He who gets the most no's gets the most yeses. That's marketing 101. But I will say this: hand the gospel to everyone, talk to everybody about the Lord. But if you're using most of your evangelistic energy trying to save people who already believe that they are saved, that's going to be a tougher road. It takes a long time. You believed you were saved and you were taught the gospel, Andrew, but it took 7 to 9 months. It was a long road, and I'm glad somebody pursued it with you, though you showed a lot of interest by going to the meetups. So share the gospel with everyone. But can I just tell you guys that there is someone God's going to put in your life today who does not believe that they are saved, who believes that they are cursed, who believes that their life is irreparably broken, who doesn't know what to do next and doesn't know if it matters what they do. Definitely try to convert your denominational friend. But if they believe that they're saved, that's a really tough road. Pursue it, but spend more energy looking for people who it doesn't look like they even believe they're savable. And so they're already humble. Which is a big, huge step for all of us. And put a little hope in their lives. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. So I'm not talking about culling candidates. I always have to caveat the things that I say. But I am saying that God's going to put those who are broken and know it. And that's what Jesus' ministry was about, wasn't it? Jesus wanted to convert the Pharisees. He converted some. But he was really targeting the people who knew that they weren't worthy. And he found quite a bit of success in that. And I think that's where we need to go with this.
So if somebody wants to reach out to you or to the group that you're a part of, wants to either maybe worship or have Bible study, what's the best way to be in contact with you?
Sure. So if you're on social media, on Facebook, you can look me up. I'm Kris with a K, Emerson, and you can Facebook message me or reach out in some way in that ilk. I do have the podcast Excel Still More that I invite you to check out, and there's some information in the intro there about how to reach me. I preach at the Lindale Church of Christ, which is just lindalechurchofchrist.com. Pretty easy to find. You can check out the services and contact us through that as well. You can reach through Andrew and find me that way too. So social media, Facebook, and the Lindale Church of Christ page are pretty good starting points.
Well, thanks again for having this discussion and joining me in this very important conversation that needs to continue to be held and to have. And I pray that those that have been watching are encouraged, whether it be those that have been Christians for a long time, or if you're not yet having that relationship that you believe that you need. We hope that what has been said has sparked something within you, that will encourage you to dig deeper, or maybe you're not even on the road yet, on that path. And that's what we want to make sure that people are on that right path. Jesus said it's very narrow, and he's himself made it clear that it is narrow. But we want and hope that we're encouraging people and equipping people to be on that path that will ultimately lead to the eternal home of heaven. And we pray that what we've done during this time together has glorified God, but has encouraged you that are watching. So we hope that you have found encouragement this day, and that you are seeking to know God. And feel free to reach out to me if you want to ask more questions, if you want to have a study, or just know more about God. Feel free. Please reach out and make sure that you are seeking him and doing what he has desired for all of us, because he wants everyone to be saved. And that is so important for us to remember. So thanks again for tuning in. We hope that you'll plan on tuning in when we have another episode of Let's Talk One-on-One with the Bible. Until then, may God bless you and take care.